Good evening.
Good evening.
How are you doing?
Baruch Hashem, wonderful, thank you.
Baruch Hashem, I'm glad to hear.
Yeah, fantastic day, very good.
Baruch Hashem.
Yeah. Oops.
Doing good things?
I had very, very good things done for me today because I reached a very advanced age. Days of the week with an O at the end.
In Nainahara.
So my children, all I wanted was a card from each child because I never usually get all cards. And they sent me them all. And then came the surprise gifts.
Go on.
I had a beautiful album which Eitan's wife Hannah Fagey made, and all the children sent their pictures of their children, their family when we're together for all different things. And then there were some chocolates, and then there was a bunch of beautiful flowers for me, summer flowers, all unexpected, completely and utterly. So, as Brian would say, this was a 2-box day of tissues, but worth it, worth everything. And they also arranged a Zoom thing.
Oh wow!
So I could see all my children and all the grandchildren.
Fantastic!
So,
wow, what a day!
So unexpected, really emotional. I'm such an old baggage. However, it's just amazing, honestly. I never expected any of that.
Beautiful.
Well, happy birthday.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh, and 70's only beginning.
There we go. There we go.
The beginning of what? Downhill.
The beginning of maturity.
Thank you. Oh, maturity. Oh, I thought you were going to say wisdom because I definitely haven't got that. I'm waiting for it to come. And so the children actually as well, but doing my best. Doing my best. Oh dear. Yeah. Easy to be kind because they're not here, so. Oh, but it was wonderful. They made it wonderful. So.
It's nice to feel loved.
It is. Do you know that? And I know that they love me, and I know they've all got very busy lives, but they all took time out to actually do something for me, and it was so special. And to see their faces, and to see how the children are growing up, my grandchildren, it was beyond anything, actually. It was, it's a red letter day. Brill. Absolutely. So good.
Okay.
Oh, no, that's beautiful. It's really beautiful to listen to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm very happy.
Baruch Hashem, very fantastic. Fantastic. And the hard work all the years you put in. All the wonderful brachas for a birthday.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Blessings from Hashem.
Yes. Extra learning today as well. I am so grateful for
yes.
Extra learning. Yes, I did extra. I do anyway. Extra learning. Before Tisha B'Av, and I learn every day. But I did extra today as well, so that Hashem knows I'm very grateful. I am grateful. Oh dear.
Many, many more years to come. 180, 190, 500.
Oh, thank you, on me.
When Mashiach comes, it says Chaim Nitzchim, eternal life. We're looking forward. Let's get going. Baruch Hashem. With Gesundheit, nicht Persian, all the good brachas.
Thank you.
Kayach. Okay, we're going to start tonight's shir talking about what's going on this week. We finished yesterday was the yard site of the Arizal, who famously, he wasn't a Hasidic master himself because he lived before the generations of the Hasidim for Baal Shem Tov, but a lot of Hasidus is based off the teachings of the Arizal, because Arizal famously was the one who turned the tables, so to speak, where he turned the secrets of Torah into available teachings, which he encouraged everyone to get to know. So a lot of what we're learning in these types of discussions are discussions that revolve around the Torah learning that isn't necessarily in the literal text, but within the text and within the depths of the text. And that is a gift that the Arizal gave us 400 years later. And if you don't mind, I'm going to do the mute thing. And if anyone wants to unmute yourselves at any time, it's *6 on the computer, on your phone, or unmute on the computer at any time. If you have any questions, suggestions, comments, arguing, whatever you want. And that's the idea of 5 Menachem of the Arizal's Yartzeit. The Arizal's Yartzeit was yesterday, and we're running on that energy with a new year. But in addition to that, this week, obviously, famous on the calendar, is the saddest day on the Jewish calendar, Wednesday night, Thursday, which is Tisha B'Av, the 9th of the month of Av. And the 9th of Av is the day where we remember and we think about, we mourn, cry over the terrible destruction of the Holy Beis Hamikdash the first time round, and then almost 500 days later, the second time round. And then after that, and before that, it's also a date of many sorrows, troubles for the Jewish people, ended up coming out exactly on that day. But of course, as we said before, the Rambam tells us already in Halacha that the sadder the day is, the happier and more joyful it will be at the time when Mashiach comes and the third Beis Hamikdash will be rebuilt. So it's a serious time, it's a sad time, and it's a time of where we commit ourselves to try and make things better. So this week, the 5th day of the week, Thursday, is Tisha B'Av. But if that's not enough, that we have the Arizal's Koyach to look into the depths of a sad day and be able to see and bring out of the tears, to bring out joy, to bring out hope, to bring out faith. We also have on Shabbos will be Shabbos Nachamu. Shabbos is the day, the Shabbos of comfort, because every Shabbos, every week, when we read in Shul the Parshah of the week, the Haftorah for the past 3 weeks have been Haftorah's readings from the prophets of sad prophecies that prophesied that we wouldn't be okay, the Beis Hamikdash, the Holy Temple, will be destroyed, Jerusalem will lie in ruins, and then starting from right after Tisha B'Av, this Shabbos already, Parshas Vaeschanan, will be Shabbos Nachamu. And the Haftarah opens up with Nachamu, Nachamu, Ami, comfort, comfort my people, that Hashem is comforting us, that not only will we once again rise to a state of where we can physically go to a godly address, the Holy Temple, but it will be in such a way that it will be comforting. We will be comforted on the past losses as well. Not just it will go back to normal of being inside the Beis Hamikdash, we will be comforted for the losses that we had and we experienced going by in the past. So that's the Haftarah and the Shabbos that we are looking forward to the end of this week, Shabbos Nachamu. Hopefully we will read that in Yerushalayim, in the Beis Hamikdash, with it being rebuilt by Meher V'Yameinu. So that's what's going on in the Jewish calendar this week. Let's talk about what's going on in the Parshah this week. So we are, as we said last week, in the 5th book, the second Parshah. We've started the very last book of the 5 books of the Torah. And in Sefer Devarim, Moshe Rabbeinu is basically giving us drushes, speeches, over and over the different points of the stories that we experienced as a people, the mitzvahs that we got from Hashem, and then, of course, encouraging us to stay on the straight and narrow, to keep doing the right thing and not let us get caught up left, right, and center, but instead doing what we have to do. So the parasha opens up with Moshe Rabbeinu discussing how he personally had his own request from Hashem. And that was that Hashem had punished Moshe that he would not be able to go into Eretz Yisrael, would not be able to cross over into Israel, and he had insistently asked and begged Hashem to forgive him and allow him to go in. And yet the answer was no. He can't go in. Instead, he was told to climb up the mountain and be able to look over the border of the River Jordan and look over up and down the whole country of Eretz Yisrael to be and to see the future of the whole Eretz Yisrael. but only see it from afar. But you cannot go there because that's not a place where Moshe can go yet until Mashiach comes. And that's where Moshe ends up staying on the eastern side of the River Jordan. And that's where Moshe Rabbeinu passes away. And Yeshua will be the one to lead them in. But Moshe Rabbeinu, in this week's Parshah, reviews some of the major highlights of our history. And he tells the people why I'm revising this with you. So what are the major highlights? Number one, that Hashem took us out of Egypt. We were slaves, and Hashem took us out. It was only 40 years ago. We were slaves, and we had no hope of ever setting ourselves free. There was no way it could happen. And yet out of nowhere, Hashem came and whipped us out of there. Yitzias Mitzrayim. Hashem saved us. And then he goes on to say, from there, we had another enormous event, and that was Matan Torah, the gift that Hashem gave us of the Torah. Hashem took us out of slavery, brought us to the giving of the Torah, and there Hashem presented us with the Torah. And these two stories, obviously, these are the basic fundamentals of what makes Jewish people Jewish. Hashem nominated us as his nation, and then gave us the Torah, which makes us into who we are. That's what makes us Jewish. The obvious observation that we make, that you have people who are Jewish that look so different, talk different, eat different, dress different, and yet we are all equally Jewish. How does that work? How could you have an Iraqi Jew that never tasted cholent or gefilte fish, and he doesn't even know what gefilte fish is? He doesn't speak English. He reads his own siddur in a totally different accent, and he dresses completely different than the Ashkenazic English Jew, yet we're both Jewish. How does that work? With what are we the same? We both don't live in Israel. We live here, they live there. Why are we same? With what are we the same? And the answer is Torah. Torah. The Torah is what makes us Jewish. And they have an obligation to Torah, and we have an obligation to Torah. Hashem gave their great-grandparents Torah, and they hold on to it, and we the same. And therefore, if you were to read their Sefer Torah, which was passed down from generation after generation in Iraq, there's no Jews, not many Jews left in Iraq, but Iran. Or if you were to look in our Sefer Torah, it's exactly the same, because Torah is what brings us together, and it's Torah that makes us into Jewish people. Trying to be Jewish without the Torah is almost trying to be yourself, but lose your own identity. Rahman al-Islam. So this is how we appreciate Torah so much. But Moshe Rabbeinu says there's another reason why I need to repeat this to you. I want to tell you why Hashem did this to us. Why did Hashem make these miracle shows? Miracle shows where he demonstrated the splitting of the sea, the 10 Commandments, and then us Matan Torah, thunder and lightning, the whole business, and talking to us. And every individual Jew heard themselves, not just through a prophet, themselves that heard Hashem talking to them. Says Moshe Rabbeinu, not because he's trying to scare you, not because he's trying to make us dizzy, but because Hashem wants us to know that it's real. It's real. It's not just a dream. It's not just a wish or a hope. When we talk about Hashem's existence, it's real. When we talk about the effect of Torah mitzvot, it's real. And throughout history, amazingly, there has never been any other faith or program, Havdil, or anything else that would try to compare, that could ever claim this claim, that 2-3 million people witnessed the revelation. It just can't be done. And the Rebbe points out the reason why it can't be done is because you can't create such a lie. You couldn't create a lie like that because you couldn't assume, you could never suggest that there were 3 million people who know the secret, but nobody else knows it, and I'm about to tell it to you. It doesn't work. And it hasn't worked even when people try to undermine Yiddishkeit. And this teaches us one of the interesting things, that from a purely historical perspective, Yiddishkeit and Torah, written into the book, teaches us how our rational mind can come to terms with it. Interesting angle. In Parshas Vaeschanan, Moshe Rabbeinu articulates to the Jewish people, just read the story and you will understand how lucky and how special it is that we have the Torah. So that's the Torah and Yitzias Mitzrayim mentioned. And then we have Moshe Rabbeinu at the end of the Parsha predicts to the people what's going to be. And unfortunately, he says that he knows at the end, as time goes on, it's going to wear off, as things do. And as things wear off, people are going to fall into the trends of the time and idolatrous trends. And unfortunately, it means that exile will come upon the Jewish people and we'll be thrown out of the land. But yet, there will be there will be a goal, there will be a redemption, all will come back. And Moshe Rabbeinu in this week's Parshah has the whole backwards and forwards, that even when we're low, we don't stop because we know we can rebuild. The highlights of this week's Parshah, of course, is the 10 Commandments that we read in Sefer Shemois, but are now repeated here in Sefer Devarim. And the other big highlight in this week's Sedra is the Shema. The Shema is also written in this week's Sedra. And in the Shema, we have the mitzvah of Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, accepting the oneness of Hashem. We have the mitzvah of V'ahavta, to love Hashem and talk to ourselves and think about things that enhance and encourage that love. We have Torah, the mitzvah of learning and teaching Torah, the mitzvah of tefillin, and of course the mitzvah of mezuzahs, is also in this etc. And this is a loaded parsha that we have, Parshas Vaeschanan. Okay, so that's what's going on in the parsha. And today we're going to try and pick one area of the parsha that's going to be able to give us a practical, relevant lesson of how to make our life more productive, more focused, more meaningful, and therefore more fulfilling. So we're going to pick one area, and the area is going to be an interesting nuance in with the description of how Hashem gave us the Torah, the 10 Commandments. That's Eretz Dibros. Hashem has one or two interesting words that the Midrash goes to town with, and this will be a life lesson, a life message of how we can make our life better. If anyone has any questions or any suggestions, you can more than welcome to try and unmute yourself and speak up at any time. Okay. Oh, we have somebody. Not yet. Okay. If anyone wants to unmute, please at any time. So here we go. Today's lesson is supposed to be, hold on a second, I'm going to restart the share. Let's share the screen and we'll get right into the lesson this week's Parshah. When everything finally clicks, no more in one ear, out the other ear. Okay? This is a very common Hasidic topic. The topic is how to make ideas stick. So that instead of learning something and being inspired and excited about it, we instead have what it takes to make it actually change our behavior and how we live our life. And this is obviously a very big Hasidic topic for the simple reason, everything we learn is in order to be a better person, to be a more involved Yid. And if what we're learning isn't doing that, then we're going to ask ourselves the question, are we learning the wrong way? Are we learning the wrong topics? So here what we will focus is going to be what in this parsha can help us make that every lesson that we learn should be taken and actioned properly. So we're going to start off with a classic example. Please don't be offended. But we'll put it on the board here, a picture of a car driving, and the driver has unfortunately used their phone whilst driving, texting, whatever, and the car has crashed into a phone. Obviously, it's a picture from the massive marketing campaign which took place in America. And the phone that it's crashed into, the giant phone reads, the son says, "Dad, when will you be back home?" And the dad's in the middle of responding, "I'll be home in," smash. And of course, the message, this picture, was designed to give over is to tell people how dangerous it is to text whilst driving and encouraging people to take the move to not text anymore. This phone in the picture is an iPhone, if I'm not mistaken, and it is from 2010. How many years ago was 2010?
10 years.
10 years ago. 10 years ago, the iPhone was just about coming out. It was like the brand new thing, iPhone, the Anoichi phone, the phone that's all about I. But the iPhone was coming out, and at that point, it was becoming more and more of an issue. People were they were becoming so attached to their handsets that they couldn't resist the dangerous texting during driving. And believe it or not, the telephone companies, the mobile phone carriers, launched a campaign. And it was years they ran it. Millions and millions of dollars went into, I think the company was AT&T. I think they have 165 million users. And here they are, the telephone companies are trying to convince their own users to not use their phone. To not use their phone during driving. And unfortunately, after 2 years of pouring money into this enormous campaign of billboards and television ads and radio ads and pop-ups on your phone and commercials and videos and all sorts of things to try and get people to realize how dangerous it is, they did a survey before they started, and they figured about 68% of their users acknowledged that they do that dangerous act of texting during driving. 2 years later, in 2012, they ran a survey again to see how well they had done with the millions of dollars that they spent into it. And the result was, from 68%, it turned into 69%. So not only hadn't helped, the situation had gotten worse. It had gotten worse. So much for marketing and trying to convince people to make real change when it's addictive, when it's something that we get into the habit of and we're not ready to shake off. So this is a real example that hopefully doesn't talk to us, but we can appreciate. And the idea of trying to make a change and struggling to keep it and hold it down, obviously we all have in our own areas in different parts of life, whether it's in Yiddishkeit and mitzvahs that we're trying to keep and not do undo, what we have in our personal life, in our work life, in our schedules, in our behaviors, whatever it might be. And the question is, what can we do? Not only so much to help everybody else, because that's the next question, but how can I help myself internalize to the extent that it will change me, the idea that I'm learning? So that's the objective for tonight. We're looking for a tool to be able to help us hold down good commitments, or hold up good commitments, good behavior changes. And this is a real question. I think we're keeping it vague enough that we feel safe to be able to apply it. But I will encourage you right now to think of one area of your life that you could try and apply all the steps that we're going to go through in tonight's class, and have something in mind and think to yourself, is it or is it not reasonable to connect what we're learning to this particular area? So if you've thought of something that works for you, that's in your area, that's something that you wish you could change, but you've tried before and it hasn't changed for long, so that's the one area that we want to focus on. And we're going to do a Chassidische Verbringen. And the reason why we're going down this route is because I'm going to try tonight reading less text and trying to do more discussion about the text. We'll mention the text, we'll put them on the screen, but I think we're going to try and do Verbringen style, because I believe it might be a little more productive, certainly for this topic, but in general also. So the Chassidische term, the Verbringen term for this idea, the Friedrich Rebbe brings it down in his Sefer Sichos, and the term he uses is deheren. Not only to hear something, but deheren. The Friedrich Rebbe has a beautiful story, which he writes in Sefer Sichos. You can find inside the book, Tafresh Sadik Gavav. And there, the Friedrich Rebbe describes a story that came to him. Story, it's always nice to hear a story. The story is of a simple Hasidic Jew. And when the Hasidim used the word simple, it was a compliment. Why was it a compliment? Because simple means not complicated. Simple means that I do what I have to do, and I don't get overly clever about how to wiggle out, how to make it be what I want it to be. Instead, I do what I need to do without making it complicated. The simple faith of the simple Yid was one of the Baal Shem Tov's biggest treasures. He loved it. And similarly with the Hasidic masters as they went along. In this particular story, the story talks about davening. How long is the ideal amount of time that a shul should daven on Shabbos morning? What's an ideal amount of time that Shachris and Musaf should take? Any suggestions? If we start at 10 o'clock, what would be an ideal time to finish?
12:30.
12:30? 2.5 hours?
Yeah.
Anyone else?
12 o'clock.
12 o'clock? 2 hours?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that someone writing?
The time it takes to daven?
The time it takes to daven, however long. This is a Hasidic answer. Here's the next question. If it takes, let's say, 2 or 2.5 hours to daven in shul, but that includes reading the Torah, the Chazan has to do the repetition of the Amidah for Shachris and for Musaf. You might have a rabbi's drasha, a rabbi's speech in the middle. How long should it take when you're davening at home because it's COVID, because it's Corona? Longer? Shorter? Half the time? The same amount of time? How long should it take me to daven at home when there's no shul?
The same amount of time with Kavana.
Same amount of time. There's no laning. There's no repetition. There's no drasha. Same amount of time. Okay?
Yeah.
You get the way I'm going, though. We're asking, is davening something that takes a fixed amount of time? Or is davening, not that you've got to say a certain amount of words, but davening is an experience. How long does it take to journey through the experience? It depends on what mood I am. It depends how connected I am. It depends what I had for breakfast. It depends how focused I could be. And the more focused I can be, the more I can let the journey take me over. The more I can join along in that journey. In Hasidic lingo, that is the term of davening ba'avodah. Davening ba'avodah means to daven working, like real hard work. And as the Chazal tell us, what's avodah? Shebelev. What does it mean that your heart is working hard? When a person gets carried away with davening. And amongst the Hasidim, it was considered a compliment. It was very special to see somebody staying back in shul after everyone's going home, because they're not finished yet. Of course, it's very special to be able to daven with the 10 people, with the minyan, and follow along and keep up with everybody else. But it's also very special to not keep up with everybody else. And whilst everybody might have finished an hour ago, 2 hours ago, the chassid davens, and davens long, and 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they're still just about finishing. I have a good friend who's the rabbi in, I forgot what his name, in Booker. Where's he the rabbi in? The Aryeh. He tells his congregants on Yom Kippur, you get double points for being on the wrong page, as long as it's your page. You get double points for being on the wrong page. And he says, look, don't be looking over your shoulder to see what everyone else is up to. You get double points for being on your own page, because if you're on your own page, you're journeying. If you're on the right page everyone else is, then fine, you get 10 points for flipping the pages correctly. What about davening? What about getting on the journey? So the Friedrich Rebbe writes a story about a simple chassid, a caring, meaningful chassid, who wasn't a tremendous scholar. He couldn't give a drasha, he couldn't learn that much himself, but he would daven for hours and hours on end. And this would go on not for one day, not for 1 week, not for 1 year, 40 years. The guy is davening every Shabbos. He's not rushing home. Everyone else is gone. And this guy sat in the corner and he's davening. And it was so beautiful to watch him. Someone asks him, what are you doing for so long? He's saying the words twice, 3 times, 4 times. What are you doing? You're not thinking about tremendously deep concepts because you don't learn those kind of things, and it's not your kind of thing. You're not a scholar or a meditator. What are you doing? And he said, I was one time by my Rebbe, and he shared with us an idea that was so meaningful to me. That's the one idea I have been davening with for 40 years. And he went on to say, it's actually connected to this week's Parshah, that in the 10 Commandments and the Seres HaDibros, the 4th mitzvah is to keep the Shabbos holy, to make Kiddush. Making Kiddush is in the 10 Commandments. But there's an interesting difference. The way it's written in Sefer Shemos, the first time round it says, remember to keep the Shabbos holy. Zachar Shem Shabbos Lakache, remember the Shabbos day to make it holy. But in this week's Parsha, it doesn't say quite that. It says something almost like that. It says, Shomer Shem Shabbos Lakache, guard the Shabbos day to keep it holy. So is it about remembering or guarding? Well, you could say it's pretty much the same. But if the Torah chose to make a change in a nuanced difference, clearly teaching us something. And from this we have Zachar v'Shamar b'dibur echad. That actually the Ten Commandments were said. Here's the interesting question: which version, which wording did Hashem actually say when He spoke the Ten Commandments? We know what's written in the Torah. It says one way, it says another way. But what was the actual wording that was used when Hashem spoke? The answer is, what's that?
Both.
Both. How can you say both? The truth is I can't, but Hashem can. It was a miracle. How can you say two things at the same time? Hashem does and did. And Zachar v'Shamar, to remember Shabbos, which is the positive instruction to do something. Shamar Shabbos, to guard and refrain from doing the things we can't do. Both were said simultaneously, together. B'dibur echad, in one word. Say this in the Chadaydi. Zachar v'Shamar b'dibur echad nemru. Shamar v'Zachar b'dibur echad. Shamar v'Zachar. Okay? So we have here an interesting phrase that the Torah tells us that Hashem actually wants us to do both mitzvahs the same way. It says this simple chassid. When I daven, I remember what my Rebbe told me about this interesting phrase of Shamar and Zachar. Guard and remember were said in one word. Because the Rebbe translated this line out of context in a different understanding, but as a lesson for life. So instead of literally translating it as that the two words were said in one, it became an instruction for us to follow. And what's that instruction? So he repeated that his Rebbe taught him, Shomer, guard, Zachar, and remember, B'dibor, that whenever I say something, or anything that's going on, anything that's said, guard it and remember it, Be'echad, that it all has to be connected to the one Eibishter. Echad means one. Literally, it means it was said together, and the two words are said as one. But his Rebbe translated it that they were both words, Zachar, to remember everything that you do, and to guard everything you do, that everything that you do should be connected to the one Eibishter, to the one God. It's a play on words, really. It's a Hasidic vart idea. But this chassid heard it and repeated it to himself and repeated himself, and for 40 years he played it over and over in his head. Says the Frierdiker Rebbe, he didn't just hear the idea of this Hasidic vart, he took it in, internalized it, and made it part of him. So much that he could use the Yiddish phrase, deheren. Now, I don't know of an English translation that works for the word deheren. Deheren loosely translates as not just to hear something, but to listen. What's the difference between hearing something and listening to something? When you hear it, there's noise going on, and it's gone into my ears, and therefore my brain processed it. It doesn't mean that it means anything to me. To listen to something, I'm attentive. I'm taking note. I'm involved. And that's much more than just hearing. But the truth is, deheren is much more than that. The deheren means that something became, not only that I know it, it's part of who I am. It's changing me. I'm becoming part of this idea. Not only that I know about it and I care about it, but this has now become who I am. It became part of me, or I became part of it. That's the deheren and inyan, to take it in all the way to the very end. And this chassid, for 40 years, davened with the one idea, no new information. No new information. The same idea. More and more and more and more and more and more, over and over again, and spending time on it until they heard the Indian. And this, the Frierdiker Rebbe felt like was such a beautiful, gorgeous story. He wrote it into Sefer Asichos. And he wants us to know it, and that's what we're learning here. So today we're going to talk about the Hasidic concept of Deheren. So far, so good? Any questions?
No.
Okay, we're going right along. We're going to look at a verse in this week's Parsha because we're going to see how this week's Parsha teaches us how to accomplish Deheren. I'm sorry, I'm not using an English word. I just don't know of an English word that can sufficiently translate the word Deheren. But it means to make it part of me. Here is the pasuk in this week's Sedra from the book of Devarim. This Parshah of Vaeschanan that's describing Hashem talking to the people, and he's talking the 10 commandments. It says the verse, says the pasuk, God spoke these words to your entire assembly at the mountain out of the midst of the fire, the cloud, and the opaque darkness, with a great voice which did not cease. And he inscribed them on 2 stone tablets and gave them to me. So there was a whole fireworks show going on, tremendous display of Hashem's power. But there's one little part here that Rashi feels he needs to explain. The voice did not stop, did not cease. Lo Yosef, it did not stop. And Rashi's bothered. What does that mean? The voice didn't stop. Which voice does stop? And Hashem's voice isn't heard now. So how did it not stop? What does it mean that it's not stopping? How do we translate the simple translation of a voice that did not cease? So Rashi gives his explanation, and from there we're going to turn to the Medrash to find 3 more translations. And then we're going to choose the 3rd one to focus on and use that as a lesson. But before we do that, does anyone have any suggestions of what it means that the voice of Hashem did not stop?
Could it be continuous creation that we're saying that Hashem
Talk about
is
the 10
always
commandments, the Seres Adibris. Hashem's voice didn't stop when he said the Seres Adibris.
It's one continuous flow.
Someone's learned Rashi. Someone's learned Rashi. Very good. Very good. Rashi says that he did not stop. Usually when a person speaks, you've got to breathe in between. So even if you non-stop talking, it's not really flowing all the way. It's like a broken stream. It keeps going, coming, going, coming, going. And Hashem gave us the 10 commandments without breathing in between, which is only something Hashem can do. And that's what it means. Lo Yosef did not cease. Okay. Any other suggestions? I'm going to put the Medrash on the screen. And we're going to read through this Medrash. As we said, it's got 3 suggestions or 3 answers, 3 explanations. And we're focusing on the 3rd one. So here's the Medrash. Medrash Shmois Rabbah. Hashem spoke these words to your entire assembly with a great voice which did not cease. Rabbi Vaeschanan said, the one voice split into 7 voices, which then split into 70 languages. 70 languages means that whichever language you are comfortable with, the voice reached you and you got it. It's almost like you might have like Google Voice could probably do this, where you need to speak and it will immediately translate into every language, and every user or whichever country they're logging into the website from gets it in the language that they are comfortable with. Hashem did that 3,300 years ago. He spoke the 10 commandments and everybody heard it in their own language. It didn't stop. So it was a voice that spoke non-stop. It didn't stop for only people who speak Hebrew. It continued going on and on. That's one explanation. Explanation number 2 is nice. It's great. It says Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. Shimon ben Lakish was the brother-in-law of Rabbi Vaeschanan. And he says every prophet throughout history has prophesied from this voice. The voice is still ringing. You need to be a prophet to be able to hear it. But it's still there. And when a prophet prophesizes, he's prophesying at the back of this voice. So it didn't stop literally means that. The voice of the Seres Adibris, the 10 commandments, are still ringing today. So answer number one was that the voice came to every single person, whatever language they spoke. And answer number 2, it came to every single generation, years to come. Lesson number 3, the rabbi said, the Rabbanan said, it did not have an echo. The voice traveled. What's an echo? When the voice rings out and it hits a hard surface and then rebounds. That's what an echo is. So if you're in a mountainous area where you speak out and the voice travels and hits the mountains on the other side, then you hear an echo come back because the voice got stopped by the mountain and sent back, and then you hear an echo. And here the voice waves of Hashem weren't stopped by anything, they traveled. Same thing if you're in an empty room, and you move into a new house, you say something, and the walls push back the sound waves, and you hear an echo. That's an echo, and Hashem's voice didn't have an echo. And here the Rebbe asks, brilliant question. There's actually 3 questions. The Rebbe asks, what's going on here? Number 1, why would you try and say that Hashem's voice had no echo? Doesn't that imply that the voice wasn't very strong? The voice didn't rebound off anything? The voice didn't bounce off anything? Doesn't that sound like it wasn't a strong voice? Number 2, why did Hashem create the miracle of no echo? What's the point? I know why Hashem created the voice didn't stop into future generations. That's brilliant. I know why every person would hear it in their own understandable language. That's brilliant. But what's the gain of having a voice that doesn't have an echo? Why would Hashem make such a miracle? What would be the point of such a miracle? And then, of course, the third question is, what's the lesson? What does it teach me? How does it make me a better person now that I know that Hashem's voice of the 10 Commandments and the Seres Dibros didn't rebound? It just kept going. What does that mean to me, and how does it help me? And the short of it is going to be the heron concept. The heron concept means making a sound become part of me is a Seres Dibros. That's the lesson, not of what was said by Mount Sinai, by Har Sinai's Seres Dibros, but how it was said. And we're learning from Har Sinai how to listen to the Torah. And that's the heron trick in this week's Sedra. So let's try and put this on the board. What is the significance of obscure detail, and why did Hashem make the no deals? There is a guru ran idea, whatever, you can Google this idea, where tidying up your house has a whole system, and you get rid of everything that you don't need, and you only leave very minimal amounts, and the whole system of how you get rid and where you start from and how you work it around. But the bottom line is, the last step is that you, how do you decide which items you're going to keep, which you're not? You've got to ask yourself if this item sparks joy. If this item is bringing you joy, then it's a good chance it's something you want to keep. But if there's a couch or a table or a chair or a piece of clothing that doesn't make you happy, so those are the items you want to get rid of. You want to drop, because you want to limit it only to the items that you need. And the theory behind it is based on that a person has to connect to the items that they have. The inanimate objects in my life are also affected by how I feel about them. So if an item and me aren't getting happy together, so then something's wrong, and therefore the item isn't going to encourage me to be tidy. It's not going to help me be productive, the whole business. Fine. So that's this guru's theory. No problem. What's amazing is that in Gemara, in Chazal, you have things that seem to be implying at least similar ideas, that the inanimate objects in our life absorb how we behave with them. And they can then give off that sort of aura. Amazing. It's fascinating to see such a connection, but this is going to be part of the lesson of the heron, because the item absorbs the concept. Let's put it on the screen. We have here a Gemara in Baba in Yerushalmi, in Maseches Cotton, where the Gemara says the stick, the walking stick, the staff of Rameya was given over to his Talmud, to his student, and when he held it in his hand, it would impart to him knowledge. He would be more smart when he was holding the staff of his teacher. How amazing. His teacher's staff helped him be more amazing. Then you have all sorts of other things where the beams of a person's house are affected by the behavior that takes place within them. Then you have also similar things in the Gemara of Bechaya about how people wanted to be buried in the wood of the table on which they sat and learned Torah, or which they worked on, so that the table which had been conditioned by the Torah learning or by the honest business that they did, should be a good aura around their body as they go and travel into the world to come. And all that sort of idea that we have here is where a person has done good things with the items that are inanimate, that are just there, but they are being filled with kedusha, with goodness, and they change therefore. That's amazing. Because if this is true about items, how much more so is this true about the human in itself? If a physical object can absorb spiritual content, certainly I can absorb spiritual content. And it can make it not only something that's sitting on me or next to me, I can make it into who I am. I can make it into what I am. And this is the idea of the Heron. So in this week's Sedra, we have a lesson from the way the Torah was given. Not only from the words of the Torah, but from the way the Torah was given. And that's going to be a big part of the key. Because what was given to us at Har Sinai was mitzvahs, instructions, information, things that we needed to know. And then with that, we have the Ten Commandments. But that's only the framework that the Torah is giving us. But the environment, the setting, and how it was presented to us also has a tremendous lesson. In this particular Sicha, the Rebbe wants us to notice how the Torah was delivered. And the word the Parshah uses to describe that is so instructive. Let the wording, let the mitzvahs, let the knowledge and the information sink in. So instead of looking for more or new information, different data, I know that already, give me something new. We have to learn from the chassid who sat there for 40 years trying to internalize the same idea. So we have the Aseres Adibros, but Hashem wants us to know that the sound of the Aseres Adibros didn't stop, means it was absorbed. Says the Rebbe, if we understand the word not stopping, do not cease, as it was absorbed rather than it didn't rebound, it's a lesson and a window into understanding what style of communication Hashem had. What does he mean? Going back to the example of why sound rebounds when it hits a solid material, wall. And the reason why it rebounds is because the wall doesn't let the sound come in. Amazingly, the softer material is, the more the sound waves can be absorbed. And then when you're deciding what flooring you're going to have, so they'll tell you if you get carpet, there'll be less of an echo. If you get tiles or whatever, there might be more of an echo. Same with your ceiling. If you get a false drop ceiling that's made out of sound absorbent material, then there'll be less echo and it'll be more comfortable with the whole business. Why? Because certain materials absorb more and certain absorb less. And based on that, there'll be more or less of an echo. Says the Sicha, when there was no echo, what it's telling us isn't that we didn't hear echoes. That's not the important bit. There was no echo because everything about creation took in, internalized Hashem's words. And that's another lesson from the Aseres Adibros. It's not information, not data. It's not just what you're going to know. It's how we're going to know it. We're going to let the Hashem's words become part of me. The truth is, for human beings who are thinking beings, emotional beings, the best way to do that is by spending time on it. I think about it once, I think about it twice, and as the more I think about it, the more I'm able to connect with the idea. But the first and foremost step is to know that I don't have to only hear more information. Not only do I have to listen to take it in, to be conscious and understanding what's going on, that's still not enough. Because when I want to become a changed person, I need to be able to let it sink in. Unfortunately, we try not to do that usually until we're forced to. So the trick is to force ourselves. And the way the Chassidim would do that is through spending time and forcing myself, so to speak, to spend time, not with new information, but with the same old information that's so important. And that's the idea of Der Herren. There's another beautiful story that the Frierdiker Rebbe has. I'm just seeing if I can bring up that text. The Frierdiker Rebbe has about another chassid who spent time with the Herren. It was a slightly different story. Oh, here we go. Is this it? A Hasidic Jew knows. No, the next one. 13. What's 13? Here we go. There's a well-known story regarding a certain wealthy chassid who was a fierce devotee of the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe was many, many years before the previous Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe was author of the Tanya. So the Frierdiker Rebbe is telling us a story about the Alter Rebbe. And this chassid, who was a fierce devotee of the Alter Rebbe, used to donate large sums of money to the Rebbe's causes, to strengthen our holy land and to release Jews from debtors' prisons. As a man of great means, the chassid had already married off his children who were also doing well. He had undertaken to help marry off the children of his relatives by designating fine dowries for them, and he generally led a life of luxury. But, that's all the stories have. But, in time, the wheel of fortune suddenly turned. He lost everything and became a pauper, while incurring massive debts. He set out to the Alter Rebbe and poured out his bitter heart before him. You can imagine he had a lot of dealings with the Rebbe. He'd been sponsoring and he'd been giving, donating, etc. And now he's in his need. So he comes to the Alter Rebbe. After hearing the man's plight, the Alter Rebbe raised his head and said in his trademark sing-song voice, "You speak of your needs, but of what you are needed for, nothing." The chassid felt faint and had to be taken out of the Rebbe's room by his assistant. Once he had returned to himself, he began to reflect on what the Rebbe had told him. He forgot about his own situation and then properly devoted himself to Torah and to prayer. After some time, the Alter Rebbe instructed for the chassid to be called in. When the chassid heard that it was being called to the Rebbe, he became very distraught. He began to review over and over and over again the holy words that the Alter Rebbe had told him. You speak of your needs, but what you are needed for, nothing. He profusely fasted and worked on refining his character. By the time he went into the Rebbe, he felt as broken as a potsherd, says that Frierdiker Rebbe. I love the wording that Frierdiker Rebbe uses, so poetic. And the Alter Rebbe told him, now that you know and feel God's eternal truth, that God was, is, and will be all at once, that a soul clothed in a body can arrive at this truth, you can travel home, and may the one above grant you success. And that is what happened. His wheel of fortune turned back. What changed? How did he become such a changed man? Why did he all of a sudden take it so much to heart? You know, there was another person in recent history that made a similar statement. JFK, John F. Kennedy, made a statement, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And it was a call for people to step up. How many people were inspired by that speech and all of a sudden changed their lives? Not very many. Not very many. It was a great speech. But here the Alter Rebbe said something. What changed? How all of a sudden did the man take it so much to heart that he turned around so that by the time he was called in again, he was a changed person? You know what the answer is? He was willing to take it in, to the hair. It wasn't because the Alter Rebbe forced it upon him. It was because he was interested in being able to not just hear inspiring words and listen to them, but take those inspiring words and not look for something else. Not try and move on to the next soundbite. The Herren, spending time with it. And in a sense, the word verbringen, I don't know how it speaks in German, but in Yiddish, to verbringen the Zeit means to spend time. And spending time on an idea is so real, so important. That's how we absorb things. And when we absorb it, like the Aseret Adibris, they're here to stay. So if there's one area that we can point out, a relevant, practical life message from this etc., Lo Yosef. Hashem's voice had no echo. Why did it have no echo? Because the Aseret Adibris aren't just information and points on a to-do list. They're information that we're going to absorb. They're godliness that we're going to make part of us, to the extent that from head to toe, every fiber of my being is this is who I am. This is the new me. When we can take that with the herring, now we're on track. Hashem should give us the koyach to be able to do that. And whilst we do that, we will be far, far more productive. We'll be able to implement real change, real growth into our life. And Be'ezus Hashem, we'll be able to have the deherit of the things that are most important. Amazingly, 2 points. One is the Mashiach idea. That's a classic example of an idea that we know to be true, but so hard for us to buy into. Like Mashiach is so foreign to us. You know what the Rebbe's answer to that is, what should we do to make Mashiach more of our reality? The Heron. Spend time learning about Mashiach. And when we spend time with it, we'll become more to terms with it. It'll become more part of us. The more I spend exploring Mashiach, thinking about Mashiach, just coming to terms with Mashiach, letting it sink in, that is how I will become a more redemption-style individual. I'll be a Geola Diga Yid. And that is a great example of how we can make practical change, especially now in the 9 days. We're mourning the destruction of the first and second temple, Beis HaMikdash. What are we waiting for? The third one. So let's learn about it. Let's become involved in it. In the whole 9 days, we're involved in learning about the Beis HaMikdash. We're involved in about what's life going to look like when the grand shofar sounds. Is it going to come in a flash? Is it going to come in a second? Is it a process? Is it a journey? And the answer is, the more we learn about it, the more we'll know. The answer is that Mashiach starts from within. We have to start living Mashiachic redemption style. Imagine what my life will look like. Jump right in. That will come through the head, spending time with it and connecting to the concept. There's one more thing I want to put on the screen, and that is tomorrow, 8 p.m., not on this Zoom link, but there's another Zoom link that you can find on the website lechaim.org.uk/ALS. A whole group of Chabad houses up and down the country are getting together. An unbelievable evening of hope, resilience, courage from Rebbe Tzendina Horowitz, who will be talking about her own life experiences, where unfortunately her husband, since 2013, is suffering MS, may have a speedy refuah shlema, complete refuah shlema, but she'll be talking, and the idea is hard things happen, and unfortunately in the 9 days, it's very, very real, yet that's the idea. That's what we're looking forward to. So I do encourage you to log on. It is no charge, it's free, but it's worth every penny. Area that would have been charged, just go into this link at lechaim.org.uk/ALS, and right there, there's a Zoom link that you can click. It'll take you in without the passwords and everything straight in. So that's tomorrow, Tuesday, 28th of July at 8 p.m. I encourage everyone to join and share the word. Feel free. And in the meantime, I wish you all a very meaningful week with our Rizal's Yard Site, an easy fast for those of us who have to fast. If we're going to Chas v'Shalom, we'll have to. And hopefully it'll be a fantastic celebration in the Beis HaMikdash. Good Shabbos Nachamu, and all the good brachos. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to speak up. I'm happy to share.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care. Have a good week.
I think when speak, if we want.
Hold on 1 second. If you don't mind just unmuting yourself again, because I'm getting distortion. Whoever's speaking, just unmute yourself, please. Oh, I don't know who it was. Who's speaking? Just
It's Sylvia.
Oh, please. There we go.
So when Hashem's speaking, his voice is creation. So you can't have a echo because we'd only be a reflection of creation.
Fantastic. What's the difference between Hashem's voice of creation and Hashem's voice of the Ten Commandments? And the truth is there is a difference. And when we say that Hashem spoke the Ten Commandments, it's not so much that Hashem was creating the Ten Commandments. It was a voice that was to be heard within creation, which was different than the voice of creation. The voice of the Ten Commandments was a message to creation. We were the recipients of that voice, which is enormous. We meaning humans mainly, but also all of creation. So Hashem's voice of creation was obviously happening and is happening all the time. That's how creation continues to remain in existence. But in addition to that, there was a message sent to creation, and the message was absorbed. And that's the lesson we're learning today, that the messages of Hashem, and in general messages, should be given the ability to be absorbed. Teheran, did I answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. Right. Have a wonderful week.
And yourself, and thank you for this evening. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye now. Any other questions going once? Any other questions going twice? And third time. Here we go. Have a wonderful week, everybody.
Bye.
Bye now.